Everyone, this is the third ServiceNow related video in a row. Um, no, we're not becoming a ServiceNow partner, but there's just a bunch of stuff to talk about uh, regarding ServiceNow. Um, in this video, I want to talk specifically about uh, how we're expanding our Cortex product to be uh, not only an archive tool for Sharewell, which we're now calling Cortex for Sharewell, we're also extending it to support ServiceNow, and that'll be called Cortex for ServiceNow. You'll see some changes to the website in the near future to kind of reflect that, and to reflect that Cortex is becoming more of a general purpose archive tool for uh, starting with those two systems. And we're adding support for some other things that I'm not quite ready to share, but that'll be coming soon. Possibly next week, possibly the week after, we'll have a demo of some of that stuff. Uh, but in this video, I want to show you where we're at with Cortex for ServiceNow, kind of give you a peek behind the covers, behind the curtains, behind the scenes, show you Cortex for ServiceNow, and um, talk about when it's available to all of you. Spoiler alert, it's available now, but it's not available in quite the same way that Cortex for Sharewell is. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. But first, let me show you what it looks like. All right, so here we go. Here we have uh, Cortex for ServiceNow. It looks a lot like Cortex for Sharewell. Um, it's got the same blue sidebar. It says Cortex Archive at the top. That's because it's built on the same foundation that Cortex for Sharewell is. It's a lot of the same database infrastructure, a lot of the same authentication infrastructure, a lot of the same logging infrastructure, but obviously talking to a ServiceNow database as opposed to a Sharewell database. Um, the the way it connects to the database is basically the same. If you get a copy of your ServiceNow data, there are many different ways to do that. And restore it or sync it to a local database, you can use Cortex to see into that data. Now, it's not uncommon for folks who are using ServiceNow to not download the entire database. Um, so we actually have some features built into Cortex for ServiceNow specifically that allow us to only show the data that you've downloaded. Um, there are a few tables that you absolutely have to download that basically allow us to show what you're seeing on the screen. But other than that, uh, the specific tables that contain the actual data that you want to look at, you only need to download the tables that you want to keep around. Um, so let's assume that incident is a priority for you. Now, the way ServiceNow works, incident is not just a single table, it's inherited or extended from the task table. So, depending on how you sync your data, you either need to get both incident and task, both of those tables, or you have to sync a combined table. And depending on how you do that, depending on your sync tool, depending on potentially the API that you call on the ServiceNow side, there are different ways to do that. If you want to mimic exactly how ServiceNow's data is stored in the cloud, you would have two separate tables. You would have a task table and an incident table. Um, but sometimes it's easier just to kind of flatten everything. So the former situation is what's called hierarchical. The latter situation is called flat, where you just have one table for all of the incident data. And Cortex for ServiceNow will support both modes. It doesn't right this second, but it will support both modes um, when there's an official final release, so that depending on how you actually get your data from ServiceNow or sync it from through the API, it will support either of those modes. So let's look specifically at incident because there are a lot of different tables. I think in this case, I just downloaded everything that inherits from task. So let's specifically look at incident. Uh, and here, as soon as it loads, we'll be able to see the incident list. And again, this is the data that's defined in ServiceNow. So if you have customized the fields that are the columns that should show up in this list, you'll see a customized set of columns. In this case, I just stood up my personal developer instance and then synced data across. So this is basically straight out of the box data, um, and just the standard demo uh, incidents. Um, so you'll see a similar thing if you just create a brand new personal developer instance. Uh, in addition, I try to mirror the ServiceNow user experience as much as possible. So if you've seen some of our Sharewell videos, you know that you have to double click a record in order to get into the business object form. That's because in Sharewell, any grid, you double click the record and you get to a business object form. That's why that's the case. I didn't choose that user experience personally as being a web developer for a lot of what I've done. Um, I prefer single clicking on hyperlinks as the go-to user experience, which is the way ServiceNow does it. So Cortex for ServiceNow has a slightly different user experience than Cortex for Sharewell does. That's because we're trying to mirror the user experience of the tool that we're uh, archiving. Um, so in this case, we have the incident number is clickable. So let's just drill into this first one here and give it a second, and it will load the form. Not just the form, but all the different pieces of the form. So uh, obviously, this is a read-only system, and all of these fields up at the top in ServiceNow, in the actual form layout, those would actually be form controls. But here, there's no reason for them to be form controls because it's read-only. So we took a little bit of liberties with the formatting, um, but we're again, this is a read-only tool. This is an archiving tool. We're trying to balance the use case of it's a read-only tool, it's an archival tool, with the fact that it's uh, trying to mirror how another system works. So we're trying to walk that line between the two, and we don't want to take up too much screen real estate with, for instance, things that you can't do anything with. So things that would on the in actual service now try to modify the record. We're not going to show those things on the screen, because one of the big differences between ServiceNow and Sharewell is that this in Sharewell, you don't necessarily know what's going to modify a record or not going to modify a record, because it's all totally customizable. In ServiceNow, we at least can say this type of field does this specific thing, and these specific accessory buttons. I forget exactly what ServiceNow calls them. The other buttons that you see, accessory button is the Sharewell name for it. In ServiceNow, those things are going to modify a record. There are some that maybe drill into, for instance, the color. That's something that we'll add, so that you can actually go into David Miller's record, or probably have a pop-up modal or something along those lines. But we're not going to add anything that would allow you to say change the color, because you can't change the color for in an archival read-only scenario. Similarly, these other form sections show what they're supposed to. Um, and we had a lot of fun drilling down into where that data comes from, and finding it and mapping it to get, for instance, the caller to show up instead of just an ID. Which, if you've been around ServiceNow for a while, you'll know. Oh, that's actually pretty straightforward. But it was really fun learning how all of this stuff goes together, where these values come from, where that value comes from, special about that one. Um, I think I remember having some issues with short description and description because of the nested tables and that sort of thing. Um, but yeah, we're continuing to add functionality. And if there's something that you really want to see, that you obviously have in ServiceNow that you're not seeing on this screen, let us know what that is. But with that, um, I do want to talk about how you can get access to this. So I mentioned that it's basically ready. Obviously, there are things that we're looking to add. We plan on adding more things to this, and we really want your feedback in telling us what is important about ServiceNow that you need to see. That's how the Cortex for Cherwell product evolved as well. We started from a very similar place. The first release of Cortex for Cherwell was far more primitive than what I just showed you for ServiceNow, and we ran it on Cherwell databases, and people told us what was important to them, and we added those features, and we kept adding those features as people told us the next thing that was important, the next thing that was important after that. So we already have a list of things that we think are important from ServiceNow to show on this screen. Um, but we want to make sure that what we're thinking about is in line with what you need. So if you have something that you didn't see here that you really want to see, let us know. There will be links down in the video description to um, post some ideas to our idea site, which is cortex.canny.io, or you can send me an email directly. You can book some time on my calendar to maybe show me around your ServiceNow instance and show me the sorts of things that you would be looking to see so that we can replicate them. Um, but at this point in time, we absolutely want to get this on real systems. Now, you don't have to be leaving ServiceNow in order to get value out of Cortex for ServiceNow. Obviously, that was the use case for Cortex for Cherwell, but ServiceNow is not going away anytime soon, right? You might be leaving ServiceNow. That's entirely possible. Again, not because it's going away, but because you have picked a different tool. That's totally fine. Other use cases are that you might be just retooling your ServiceNow instance, and either you want to make a backup copy of your current ServiceNow database before you go changing a bunch of stuff around, or you're actually standing up a brand new ServiceNow instance and you want to archive the old one. We have a couple companies who have reached out to us and are going through that exact process, so we want to help them out in that way as well. Or you might want to have a local read-only copy of your ServiceNow data for whatever reason. Obviously, this would support that as well. You could continue to have synchronization between your ServiceNow instance and your local copy and run Cortex against your local copy to show all of that information um, as well. Maybe that's helpful for people who just need to be able to reference ServiceNow data periodically, but don't need to have full ServiceNow licenses to be able to modify data or submit um, you know, tickets that aren't their own or something like that. There really are a lot of different possibilities in this space, but we want to see how this looks on your data. We want to see how it works for you, and we want to get your feedback on what things are important to you that you want us to add to the product. Um, so it is available now. It is not available in a released version of Cortex. The next version of Cortex is Cortex 2, which is planned for the end of this quarter, potentially beginning of next. So end of February, end of March, somewhere in that time frame is what we're shooting for. But it could be as late as early April. It will have the full version of Cortex for ServiceNow in it. But in the meantime, we are uh, creating and releasing um, kind of preliminary builds, if you want to call it that, that are specifically Cortex for ServiceNow, kind of outside of the standard release cadence of Cortex. So it's not going to have a number like Cortex 1.8 or something like that. It'll probably be Cortex 2.0 dash ServiceNow or something like that. Specifically because we don't want to wait to get this out to you all. So they will be perfectly stable, production ready builds of Cortex for ServiceNow, um, just kind of outside of the normal Cortex release numbering. Um, Again, because we don't want to wait. Cortex 2.0 is going to be huge. It's going to have a lot of different functionality in it, including this Cortex for ServiceNow uh, work that we're doing. But again, we don't want to wait to get this out to you. So if you want to run Cortex for ServiceNow on your local ServiceNow database backup, it is absolutely ready now. Talk to us, schedule some time with us. We'll get you exact numbers, pricing, figure out exactly what your needs are, and make sure that we can provide all that. And uh, yeah, that can happen as soon as now. I mean, book some time with me tomorrow if you want, and we'll make sure that you can get Cortex for ServiceNow running on your system, connected up to your ServiceNow instance. Um, See how it looks, see what other features you need in order to be successful, and evolve this so that this could be a really powerful, really significant release, um, and go into Cortex 2.0 as the incredible, powerful tool that we know it already is, and certainly can be even more so. Um, so we do have pricing. It is ready to go. It is ready to be used in production. Again, talk to us. Schedule time with me down in the video description, or go to our website and book a demo. Again, the website will be updated shortly to reflect that there's basically it's a choose your own adventure. There are two adventures, Sharewell or ServiceNow, and you can book a demo for either or for both. Um, as you might have seen in some other videos, we are working on some other stuff. All of that stuff is in beta. So while our website will get updated to reflect that as well, and you'll be able to get a demo of some of that stuff. Um, Again, Cortex for ServiceNow is ready, is ready for prime time, is ready for production, is stable. Um, yeah, I don't know how many times I could say the same thing over and over again before you probably stop watching. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you very much. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. And yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what other ideas you have for Cortex for ServiceNow. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.